Yes, my great students, welcome to the exciting site where we are going to be discussing on the environment. This class is designed to introduce you to the environment. So before we continue the class, I want to take you to the field for us to have an interesting session.
Hello, dear students. My name is Dr. Michael Ahove. I'm going to be your course facilitator for this course, Introduction to the Environment. The course seeks to introduce you to the concept of the environment, discuss this concept of the environment from four different experts' perspectives. Imagine defining one thing from four different angles. For instance, this particular tree. I can attempt to define this tree or describe this tree from this angle, having four buttresses that runs downwards. Okay, I can also define this tree from this angle and tell you that this is how this tree looks like. Interestingly, I can also define this tree from this angle that it has other trees growing along with it. And finally, I can tell you and describe this tree from this other angle, having this indentation here. You can see how it looks like. That is an illustration of how the environment can be described or defined from four different perspectives. And that's what we are going to do in this course. We are going to consider how the environment was defined from four experts. And interestingly, I'm going to ask you to define the environment from your own perspective. And at the end of the day, we'll have defined the environment, understand what is the environment, have a clear understanding of the environment, and then know how to apply it in our own very dear life. And I'm sure you'll find this course quite interesting. Thank you.
Yes, welcome back to class. Yeah, that was a short way of explaining the environment and what you expect to learn in the class. So welcome again to class. So what are objectives? What are we focusing on in this lesson, the first lesson? The first thing we're going to do is to define the environment from different perspectives, as I discussed while in the last video in that field work. I told you we're going to look at the environment, define the environment from different perspectives. The second thing, we are going to state the basic definition of the environment, basic definitions of the environment. The third one, we're going to identify the difference and similarity between biotic and abiotic components of the environment. So the first thing we are going to look at is the definition of the environment. We are defining the environment from Miller's perspective. Miller is one of the foremost environmentalists in our contemporary time, and he defined the environment as a set of natural and social systems in which people and other organisms live and from which they draw their sustenance. So there is a natural system, there's a social system. The humans exist in that system, and it's telling you that other organisms, they are also in that system, natural and social, and from that system sustenance is drawn. That's where we take our sustenance. And so that's the way Miller has defined the environment. Miller, we have Barrow. Barrow is another foremost environmentalist, and Barrow defined the environment as the sum total of the conditions within which organisms live. Sum total of the conditions within which the organisms live It is the result of interaction. That's another term coming in, interaction, between, take note, non-living, which is referred to as the abiotic, comprising of the physical and chemical parameters, and the living, which is also the biotic parameter. So there are two components that Barrow has stressed, two terms, the biotic and the abiotic components of the environment. So he is talking about the sum total of the conditions within which organisms live, their interaction between the biotic and the abiotic. So looking at the organisms, how they interact with living organisms and non-living things. So, and that's the way Barrow defined the environment: interaction between a particular organism with other organisms and other things within that environment that are not living. For instance, Barrow is saying the physical parameters of a particular environment is an aspect of the environment. The physical parameters, the chemical parameters, the temperature is also an aspect of the environment. The chemical parameters is an aspect of the environment. Next, we are seeing Collins. Collins, it's a dictionary, very nice dictionary that I read about a decade ago. Very nice dictionary. Now, in Collins' dictionary, the environment was defined as the combination of external conditions that influence the life of living organisms. Now you will see that there is a difference in the way the Collins Dictionary has articulated the definition of the environment. Here, the Collins Dictionary stress external conditions that influence the life of an organism. So you will see that there is a correlation running between this definition. An organism is usually identified in terms of defining an environment. A particular organism is usually identified, and then they talk about the other parameters or conditions around that organism. So here Collins is saying the external conditions that influence the life of that organism. And so that is the third definition of the environment. Quite simple for you to understand. Let's go further and look at what Collins is saying. The external environment is made up of the interactions or the interrelationships between abiotic and biotic components. So that's a similarity with Barrow. The concept of living and non-living things influencing that particular organism in that environment. So as I said, as you define environment, you will usually define environment with reference to an organism, and then how that organism interacts with other things around it, which is the biotic, other living organisms, and the abiotic. That's quite interesting. It's for you and I to take notes of the concept of biotic and abiotic introduced here. Biotic, I've stressed it, is living. The abiotic is the non-living aspect of the environment. And that's what Collins Dictionary have said, which is one of the first environmental dictionaries that came into existence in the academia. Now I've tried to define environment myself. I said environment may be said to be all the internal and external conditions that affect an organism or other species systems during its lifetime. Aha. Trying to introduce a new concept. Internal condition. I was introducing internal condition. So what I'm saying in this definition is that the environment is not limited to the external conditions alone. How about the internal condition? The internal condition that affects the organism is also part of the environment, and other species around that organism also influence that environment, and it has to be throughout the lifetime of that species. So as long as that species is in existence, it has an environment. But once that species is no longer in existence, it has no other environment. It's dead. It's come to an end. Quite interesting. We are defining the environment in terms of a living organism. So it's time for you and I to come to a conclusion. What have we tried to do? What we have tried to do is to have an operational definition. Operational definition implies here that this is our agreement on how we want to define environment in this lesson. So environment is defined in lessons as all the external conditions that affect an organism or other specific systems during the lifetime of that organism. For instance, the environment in which a fish lives is the sea. Therefore, the sea is the environment of that fish. The environment that a baboon lives is the wild. That wild is the place where that baboon exists, interacts with other animals during its lifetime, and that constitutes the environment. Of course, there are other external conditions that are not living in that environment. For the baboon, there is the temperature, there is the wind, there is the water sources around the wild. Those external conditions influence that baboon, and that also constitutes the environment. Very important for you to understand those little ideas. Let's listen to someone who has learned about the environment define the environment.
Yeah, my name is Blessing Namesia. I am here to let you know what environment is all about. Environment is the sum total of our surroundings, the living things, the non-living things, which is the biotic and the ambiotic, our interrelationship between them, the species and the organism, and how we relate to each other.
Yes, that was Blessing. Blessing has attempted to define the environment. Have you attempted to define the environment yourself? It's important you try to define the environment. She stressed the environment just like we have discussed earlier. And so, let's look at biotic and abiotic components. There is a difference between the biotic and abiotic. The biotic components, as I said, they are the living components of the environment. They are the living features of the environment. They are the living characteristics of the environment. But the abiotic factors are the non-living components of the environment, where you will not regard to as non-living, that doesn't have life. Biotic and abiotic, what is their similarity? How are they related in similarity? Both terms are external conditions that influence an organism in its lifetime in the environment. Both terms are external conditions that influence an organism in its lifetime within the environment. Yes, it means the living things and non-living things within the place where the baboon survives, where the baboon draws its sustenance, where the baboon lives throughout its lifetime. You have other animals there. You have other things that are non-living. So both of them constitute the external features of the environment for the baboon. So it's important for us to consider some questions. I think we should just pick one question from someone who has gone through this course.
Gentlemen and ladies, we are in the next session of asking students questions. So, and in asking questions, it's important for us to give them support. So, the question and answer session is a moment to give them some support. I have with me one of our dear students who has some issues to mention.
Yeah, my name is Peter Ahove, a student of Lagos State University. So you have been defining the environment. Now, what's the need of stressing the abiotic and biotic components?
Yes, Peter wants to know why are we been stressing biotic and abiotic components. The simple reason is that if you define the environment without talking about the living components, which is the biotic, and the abiotic, which is the non-living components, then you are not talking about the environment. So without those two aspects, without the biotic and the abiotic, you are not talking about the environment, because the environment is made up of life, the living aspects, and the non-living aspects. These two components are the pillars in defining the environment by any other person. It's very important.
Thank you for your time, sir.
You're welcome.
Yes, that was Peter. Peter was asking an interesting and intelligent question. Why were we stressing the biotic and abiotic components? Now let's continue the class. So, in summary, we have learned in the class definitions of the environment from different aspects, from different experts, with different versions of the environment. Actually, we learned definitions of the environment as discussed by 4 experts. We have from Barrow in year 2000, from Miller in year 2000, Barrow in 1993, the Collins Dictionary of Environmental Science that was published in 1990 also gave us a definition, and Ahove also attempted in giving us a definition for the environment. Don't forget 4 experts' definition. But the 5th definition came as an operational definition that we all agreed on. So we have 5 definitions in all from 4 experts and an agreed definition, an operational definition we also gave in this lesson. And we recall Blessing, one of our students, also gave a definition. And then finally, we looked very importantly from the question raised by Peter on the difference and similarity between biotic and abiotic. Biotic is the living, abiotic is the non-living. That is a difference. But the similarity is that biotic and abiotic are external conditions that influence the environment of an organism. Very good, very good. I'm sure you are catching the concepts clearly. So, in our next lesson, which will be the lesson 2, we shall be discussing further on this topic on 4 major components of the environment. 4 major components of the environment. You wouldn't want to miss them. 4 components of the environment. Then we shall consider the relevance of these components. This component has a relevance. And finally, I'm going to highlight some examples of the features of these components 4 interesting components, and I trust you will be in class.